My little brother came back from vacation different. Last night, I found out he never came back at all. I need to get this out before I lose my mind, or before whatever is wearing my skin decides I've said too much. I'm writing this from the closet in my bedroom. It's 4:12 a.m. The house is doing that thing again, breathing. Not the normal expansion and contraction of old pipes. I mean breathing. A slow, wet inhale somewhere behind the walls, followed by a sigh that ruffles the dust on the floorboards. I can hear Liam's door creaking open down the hall, soft footsteps. They'll stop outside my room in about 30 seconds. They always do. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, because if I don't organize this, I'll convince myself I imagined all of it. I didn't. The bruise on my wrist proves I didn't. 1 week ago, my family got back from our annual summer trip. Every August, we rent the same cabin on the Oregon coast. It's nothing fancy. Knotty pine walls, a kitchen that smells like coffee and old spices, a wraparound porch facing the craggy shoreline. We've been going since I was 12. Liam's 11 now, and this year he spent the whole trip doing what 11-year-olds do, complaining about the Wi-Fi, collecting obscene amounts of shells, and following me around like a shadow. I'm 26. I moved back home after college to save money, which is its own kind of horror, but up until last week, it was fine. Boring, even. The last day of the trip, we went to a beach we don't usually visit, a cove about 2 miles south of the cabin, accessible only at low tide through a gap in the cliffs. Mom found it in some coastal guidebook. Mermaid's Grotto, it was called. Touristy name, but the place itself was strange. The sand was darker than it should have been, almost black, and the tide pools were filled with water that seemed too still, too clear, reflecting a sky that looked 2 shades too green. Liam wandered off. I was on the rocks taking pictures. Mom was reading. Dad was napping on a towel. It was maybe 15 minutes before I realized I couldn't hear him, that constant hum of a boy narrating his own adventure to no one. I found him at the far end of the cove, standing at the mouth of a sea cave with his back to me. He was perfectly still, which was wrong. Liam doesn't do still. He's a kid made of springs and noise. Liam? He didn't turn. The cave behind him was dark, and the air coming out of it smelled wrong, not like seaweed and salt, but sweeter, staler, like water that's been sitting in a closed room for years. Liam, come on! Tide's coming back! He turned then, and I remember thinking his eyes looked odd. Not the color, just the way they focused, like he was looking at me from the bottom of a well. I was just exploring, he said, and smiled. A normal smile. Liam's smile. I didn't think about it again until the drive home. We pulled into the driveway at 9:47 p.m. 7 hours of traffic, 2 rest stops, 1 screaming match about who forgot the cooler in the cabin. Me. We were exhausted. Dad unlocked the front door, and we all stumbled inside, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. Our house shouldn't have a smell. We'd been gone a week. It should have been neutral, maybe faintly musty. Instead, the hallway hit me with this thick, damp sweetness, like salt water left to rot in the sun, underneath something floral I couldn't place. The kind of smell that coats the inside of your nose and stays. Ugh, did something die in the fridge? I asked. Mom just wrinkled her nose. I'll check. Someone grab the suitcases. I turned to go back to the car and stopped. The suitcases were already in the living room, all 4 of them, lined up neatly by the couch. Ours are the hard shell kind, and they're heavy. Mine alone is 40 pounds when full. I stared at them, that wrongness settling into my chest like a cold stone. Who brought these in? Dad was already heading upstairs. Not me, Mom called from the kitchen. I thought you did. I looked at Liam. He was standing by the suitcases, one hand resting on top of mine, like he'd been waiting for me to notice. They were heavy, he said, matter-of-factly. I helped. A 10-year-old who weighs 70 pounds soaking wet did not carry 4 packed suitcases up a flight of porch steps. I opened my mouth to say so, but he was already walking toward his room, his bare feet padding softly on the hardwood. I stood there for a long time, looking at the suitcases. They were damp. Condensation clung to the shells like they'd been out in the fog. We hadn't had fog. The first night, I didn't sleep. Jet lag, I told myself. The drive, the weird smell. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle. At 2:47 a.m., I heard footsteps. Light, bare ones, pacing the hallway. I assumed it was Liam going to the bathroom. Kids wake up, it's normal. But the pacing didn't stop. Back and forth, back and forth. A slow, deliberate rhythm that went on.